Hello, I'm Pat Rullo. Welcome to Speak Up and Stay Alive, Patient Safety Radio. Today is a special program. What I'm going to address is not our usual healthcare problem. You won't find it talked about in medical schools or hospitals. In fact, you won't hear it talked about at all. And that's in part because corporations own the media and we only hear what they want us to hear. What I'm talking about today is the health of our country. Little by little, our rights, our freedoms, and our liberty are being attacked like a nasty virus. And we, the American people, are in such a state of either oblivion, denial, refusal, to realize that we are losing the health of our country once known as a free nation. Let me ask you a question. If you were to hear that in the very near future, the United States will have no privately owned property, no air conditioning, no dams, no paved roads, no ski slopes, no fences, no golf courses, no pasture land used for grazing, would you believe it? Does that thought make you feel sick? What am I talking about? I'm talking about a 3-decade-old global agenda. Some of you may recognize the name, Agenda 21, a plan for global sustainable development. Regionalism. It has many arms and many lovely terms, brought to you by the United Nations. Not only is the health of this great nation at stake, but your personal health as well. Your health, my health, your neighbor's health. Good health ultimately depends on the successful interaction between the physical, spiritual, biological, and economic and social environment. Agenda 21, through its many tentacles, manages to extend its arms around each of those and in the process squeezes the life out of freedom. So let's introduce our guest. He is Skip Claypool, a Geauga County, Ohio businessman who is running for the county commissioner seat in Geauga County. He is well versed in regionalism, but more than that, he is passionate about protecting the future of our children and grandchildren and works tirelessly to make a difference. Well, welcome to the show, Skip.
Thank you.
Today we want to zoom in on regionalism. But before we get into that, tell us about the position you are running for in Geauga County, Ohio.
I'm running for county commissioner in Geauga County. I've served as an interim county commissioner for about 6 months. I'm currently also the alternate for Rouse Spittle area on the NOACA board, with Northeastern Ohio Area Coordinating Agency. They manage federal tax dollars that are coming back to take care of supposedly our roads and bridges. They're dramatically trying to expand their scope of their own accord. They want to do that themselves without authority, which is part of the reason for this conversation today. But I am running for county commissioner, and I would ask for everybody's support and help and prayers in that.
Absolutely, and we will put your website on ours if that's okay.
Absolutely.
All righty. All right, let's get into the meat of today's topic. What is regionalism, and why should the normal, average person care?
Well, regionalism at its core is the collectivist view of how to manage the resources in a particular region. In the case of NOACA, at the regional board, they were established by a federal mandate to take care of our roads and bridges. They decided to expand their scope, they being the Metropolitan Planning Organizations, MPOs. There are 4 of them in northeastern Ohio. The largest and by far the most powerful is NOACA. AMAT, SCAT, Eastgate, and NOACA comprise the Northeastern Ohio Regional Planning Boards. They've decided that, and these, by the way, while there are elected officials on the board, various county commissioners, city councilmen, county engineers, so on and so forth, while there are elected officials on the board, as an example, Geauga County has 3 commissioners on the NOACA board, 44 other board members. And so if you look at those boards, it's accurate to say we don't elect in Geauga County. We don't elect the other board members, so they're unelected and unaccountable to us. And so they're making decisions on a regional basis, all of northeastern Ohio. It's 12 counties in northeastern Ohio: Ashtabula, Trumbull County, Geauga County, Cuyahoga County, Summit County, Portage County. These guys are making decisions on a collectivist view for all those counties. based on a set of criteria that is not open and transparent. That violates, the reason that it's important, and fundamentally I have an issue with it, because it violates the very premise of our Constitution, a representative form of government. We elect people to represent our interests. And so our state and House representatives, our state senators, our commissioners, our trustees, our city councilmen, they're supposed to make the best decisions for us locally, at a county level, at the state level. And we're able to correct misbehavior because we can unelect them and elect new people. These unaccountable, unelected individuals, we can't change. We can't impact the decisions they're making. And they make decisions that are ideologically, in many cases, a problem because they have a collectivist view of the region. And I'll give you two specific examples. So, two examples, specific examples at a high level of the problem that's created. If you hear this organization called NEOSCC, Northeastern Ohio Sustainable Communities Consortium, there's a large board, 30 or 40 people, all unelected. The Cleveland History Museum, the Archdiocese of Cleveland, the Regional Prosperity Initiative, each of the NOACA boards. These people are making decisions based on agendas they have. What you will hear them say at the core of what their concept is that if we have infrastructure, let's say in Chesterland, Ohio, which is where I live, that cost for that infrastructure impacts Cleveland. And so they say, it costs Cleveland because of all the infrastructure that exists outside of Cleveland. That's fundamentally wrong. Me choosing to live in Cleveland, my taxes go to Geauga County, my property taxes go to Geauga County, and my state taxes that come back to me that are allocated back to our townships and our counties come back. Those taxes I pay specifically to take care of my local infrastructure. Their view is they'd like to reallocate those tax dollars because if I'm making a decision, if we as a local community make a decision to put a sewer system in, that sewer system may not be in the plan or in the best interest of Cleveland, and they don't like that. So they want to change that. They want to create a master plan in which they determine, the bureaucrats, unelected, unaccountable, they can determine where people can live, where companies can locate, what the infrastructure looks like, where there are parks, so on and so forth. That violates the whole premise of free choice, freedom, liberty, everything that this country has been based on historically. The other core concept that you'll hear them talk about, and everything shoots off of these two concepts, is this concept of zero-sum gain. Zero-sum gain says that there's a fixed slice of the pie, a fixed size of the pie. And so that if I in Geauga County take a slice, then there's only so much left for everybody else in the region. That whole concept, again, is a very progressive concept, and it is fundamentally wrong. And it's wrong from the perspective that the pie always can change. If you have new industry, you have new business, whatever the case happens to be, the size of that pie is constantly and dynamically able to change based on changing conditions. But that's not within their worldview. Their worldview is that that's a fixed pie, and that if one takes a slice, and that is fundamental to the whole redistribution of wealth concept. The pie is ever-changing and growing based on the dynamics that exist within a free enterprise capitalist kind of a system, which they would like to change. It's not part of their worldview. And so those two things are fundamentally at the core of what they think. How do we know that? Because in the grant application that NEOSCC submitted through the MPOs to HUD, which provided their funding, they said that the primary problem in northeastern Ohio is a disparity of income. The primary purpose of their initiative was to cure that disparity of income. They will tell you publicly is that this was all driven by the public, that the public had their input, and that the public, is choosing the direction for northeastern Ohio. If you look below the covers, this is all about their agenda to redistribute the wealth and this whole concept of me costing them something and the zero-sum game thing. So everything shoots off from it. They want to do a regional plan for everybody, tell you where to live, where to do business, how much money you're going to pay. You got to pay for your next-door neighbor because your next-door neighbor is making bad decisions, wasting money. That's okay, and we just need to give more money to waste. And so that's why I have an issue with this whole regional concept. It's a collectivist view. Collectivist view is not part of the free enterprise capitalist ideology that I learned was what lifted all boats in this world.
Exactly. So now this view actually is part of the whole Agenda 21 type of viewpoint, yes?
Yes. I mean, again, this gets very complicated and muddy. Agenda 21 was the seed.
Yes.
If you look at the history behind it all, and I'll use MPOs as an example. In 1962, the concept of Metropolitan Planning Organization was born. They were established because we wanted to take care of our national highways. And the promise from government, and oftentimes these promises are broken, is that we're going to use the 15 cents on the gallon of gas to take care of our federal highways. In 1992, when George H.W. Bush, the first Bush, and Republican, went to the Rio summit in Brazil, this concept called Agenda 21 was introduced. If you look at that document, which exists on the United Nations website, it also exists in our EPA website. That document exists. You can't deny that Agenda 21 as a concept exists. The precepts for all of that Agenda 21 now started being taken off. I mean, it wasn't Agenda 21 as a whole document. It is all the concepts of sustainable development.
Right.
So the Department of Transportation, the EPA, HUD, all of these now became arms or little tentacles of social justice and sustainable development. And, you know, all of the mechanisms to enable what Agenda 21 is all about, which is about spreading the wealth.
Right.
Agenda 21 is about spreading the wealth globally. So America is a bad, wealthy country, and so therefore it is necessary for the world to take our money and redistribute it around the world. That's what Agenda 21 is about. You can't do that unless you control people's property, unless you control their wealth, their tax dollars, and so on and so forth. And so that's why the progressive federal government is moving to continually increase our taxes to put us in a huge deficit situation. It's all about spreading our wealth and reducing our capability around the world. And that's translating right down to the local level. It goes to all of our planning organizations. It comes down to our local governments, most often just by ignorant elected officials who have no concept. They're too lazy to go out and actually discover what the reasons are behind what they're doing.
Right.
And they don't try to tie decisions they're making every day to the Constitution. They ask questions, is this constitutional? Is this something we should be doing? Is this right? Does this promote freedom and liberty? No, that's not what they think. It's being passed down from a government organization, in this case Department of Transportation, and they do it mindlessly. They just follow along mindlessly. So it's not intentional in many of their parts, and some of their parts it is intentional.
Right.
But that's why it's so dirty. That's why it's so evil, is because it's become institutionalized within our system.
Right.
And we need to wake up and start taking that out of our system. We've got a rot within our system. We've got a disease, a virus, and it's time for us to start attacking that virus. As you oftentimes talk about health in your program. Well, this is a health situation in our government. We're sick. We've got a disease. That disease is called Agenda 21, and the symptoms are pretty easy to see. It is a loss of freedom. It is a loss of liberty, and the symptom points to a larger cause, the disease. And if we can identify the disease, we can cure it, just like a cancer.
Right.
Let's attack that disease and cure that disease. But it all comes down to awareness, and then discovering how best to attack it.
That's why it gets so confusing. I mean, you've got the smart meters, you've got Common Core, you've got the regionalism. There's all these alarms that come off of it and grab hold of us, and you're totally unaware. So that's why I think it's important to really talk about this regionalism topic today. Everyone listening in the country is affected by this in their own small township and neighborhood, whether they know it or not.
There's an author by the name of Kurtz. I'm trying to think of it. I think it's Stanley Kurtz.
Mm-hmm.
Wrote a book about regionalism. It's a great book. It talks about Obama's new plan for America, and it has everything to do with what I'm talking about. It's using HUD and using Department of Transportation and EPA as a weapon to transform America. And they've actually formed that triad, EPA, Department of Transportation, and HUD, have created another organization called Sustainable Communities. Whenever you hear the term sustainable, which you would think would be mother and apple pie, that's part of the evil behind the folks that are planning all of this, is they pick great words and they really dirty the word up.
Right.
That came out of Agenda 21. The concepts came out of Agenda 21, and it's a global effort. Mm-hmm. That global effort has moved farther along in other parts of the world. In the United States, it's moved much more slowly because we have people who resist taking their freedoms away.
Right.
But as you said earlier, it is rife within our government. So you've got the education department, which is not improving education. It's actually making education worse. Their objective is about control. What was it that Hitler did in Germany when he wanted to take over the country, when he wanted to transform the country? One of the first things he did was he took the kids and educated them in his way of thinking. Because if you can change a generation of kids, then you've just changed the whole fabric of your nation.
Right.
And so that's what Common Core is about. It's about changing the fabric of our nation. This is a long-term goal for them. This is not an immediate transformation kind of a thing. They've got a 50-year horizon in view. And if people don't wake up, my hope is that I'll be able to fight this so that my kids and grandkids do have a future that includes liberty and freedom and personal choice, that it includes capitalism and not socialism. We are headed in the direction of a Marxist society. Now, I'm not saying that it's an attack. That's a literal definition. If you look up communism and Marxism in the Webster's Dictionary, and what it says is that communism is the final step in Marxism, whereby you have a complete redistribution of wealth. That's by definition. What does our president talk about? Our president talks about redistribution of wealth. He rejects people who call him a Marxist. Well, by his own words, he's defined himself as a Marxist because that is the dictionary definition, redistribution of wealth, and the equalization of wealth. That is what I hear today when I go to NOACA meetings in Cleveland, the MPO meetings. That is what they're talking about. They make decisions on where to put our road dollars, not based on which roads are the worst, which bridges are about to fall down. They make their decisions based partially based on this concept of social justice. Where is it fair to put the money? That doesn't make any sense. No. In the world that I live in, if I'm looking at fixing something, I'm going to say, okay, what needs to be fixed? How bad is it? What's the priority list? And it's based on, a whole set of criteria that does not include social justice. That's what we're fighting right now. We're fighting this corrupting, corrosive disease within our system, and it all comes down to awareness. I just had a conversation this morning with a local a newspaper owner, and that's the whole concept that we talked about. People, generally speaking, are so focused on their personal lives, not realizing that, at the end of the day, this is really going to be disastrous for them if we don't wake up. It will impact the money that they make, the amount of money that they're able to keep and put into their families. We have gas prices increasing. We have a government that wants to increase our gas taxes another 18 cents a gallon, and these MPO organizations are lobbying for that because they want to reduce the amount of time that you travel in your car down that road and get you into bicycles and mass transit. They have a whole agenda to move everybody to a different culture.
Right.
Well, I can speak up about it, but in order to change it, we have to have a lot of people who are woken up and engaged to accomplish that.
You're exactly right. What's happening is boil the frog slowly. These changes are happening slowly enough that we don't realize what's going on. Speaking of that, we have a radio show called Boil the Frog Radio, and this next week we've got a gentleman on, a local school teacher who is going to be talking about Common Core as it applies to what we were mentioning earlier. But now I want to talk back to land. So you're driving around the area lately and you see all these signs, purchased by owned by the Land Conservancy, and we're thinking, well, that's great. Somebody's conserving the land. Let's talk a little bit about those conservation easements because, that goes along with regionalism, yes?
Absolutely. I'm really glad you brought that up because nobody's talking about that with the exception of you and me that I know of. The Land Conservancy movement is definitely a part of Agenda 21, and it has to do with control of land. And it's difficult to talk about. I was just talking to an attorney this morning, and what we're talking about is from a Land Conservancy perspective, a conservancy comes in, buys the rights to control the property. They call that an easement. And so the easement gives them certain contractual rights. Those rights exist in perpetuity, that is, forever and ever. And so those rights generally, I have a number of contracts, generally speaking, those rights are complete control. In other words, if you sell that easement to somebody, you give them the right to determine if you're a farmer, what you farm, how you farm, whether you can put a fence line in, whether you can put a pond in, if you want to change your pond, what kind of changes you're allowed to make, if you want to water your animals in your pond. You have to ask for permission for everything.
Right. Let me stop you for a second because I want to make this clear to our listeners. Who decides what property is suitable for a conservation easement or the takeover of your property? I mean, do we contact the Conservancy? Does someone knock on our door with a bundle of money and say, here, we'd like to buy your land? Is it a donation in exchange for tax credits? Explain how a piece of property may end out as being, part of the land conservancy. How does that happen?
It is an all-in approach. In other words, the Conservancy is working hand-in-hand oftentimes with the park systems. The park systems, the parks own the property, and nobody can do anything on the property unless the parks give permission. It is you and I, if we own a piece of property, nobody can do anything to that property. We protect it. The concept that they sell is we're going to protect your property for you. And so they do it through the park system. They do it through local communities. So in Chesterland, our community gave a big chunk of property to a conservancy so that they could, quote-unquote, protect it. But what that did was all future generations now will never, again, have say over that property, which is community-owned. It's owned by the township. And yet the township will never be able to say how that property is used. It's being pushed because the conservancies go directly to landowners. If they see a large tract of property, they're focused on those first, large tracts of property. But they'll take any piece of property, and they approach the landowner and say, hey, we want to sell you a conservancy on your property. It might be an old retired couple and who is no longer farming, but that large chunk of change looks attractive to them, not thinking about what they're doing to future generations. They do it. I don't blame them. It's illegal. I think it's immoral. What we're doing is selling away property rights from future generations. We're saying to the future generations, you're too stupid to make your own decisions. We don't trust you in the future to be able to protect the property and make sure that it's not polluted and so on and so forth. So we today are going to take your decision away from you because we don't think you're capable, informed, whatever. We're going to steal your decision away. We're going to be dead in the grave, but that's okay because you won't be able to make any decisions on your own property. We've just now brought a third-party partner into your property. And so the more property that they can put under these conservancies, the more control they have, the worse it is for future generations because it will be very difficult in the future to buy a piece of property that you don't have a third-party partner in.
Right. And from what I've read, that land trusts frequently flip these conservation easements to make a quick buck. So, for example, say the Nature Conservancy, I read in one particular instance, paid $1.2 million for an easement and then promptly sold it to the Bureau of Land Management for $1.4 million. And then this enabled the government to control the private property with no publicity and place the landowner under the scrutiny now of the federal government.
And that is exactly right. And look at the first, again, I hate to say this, it's scary to me to even think this, but the first plank in the Marxist Manifesto is elimination of property rights.
Right.
So our government, in transforming it, our president said he wanted to transform this nation, and he is working as hard as he can to completely transform this nation. His lineage, his father and his mother were both Marxists. He was raised by a Marxist. What do you think his ideology is? Mm-hmm. Forget what he says. Think about how he grew up. He didn't grow up going to 4th of July parades like I did. He didn't grow up being told that the Constitution was great and saluting the flag and saying the Pledge of Allegiance and saying the prayer every morning, Lord's Prayer. That's not how he grew up. He grew up in a whole different world, in a whole different environment. His ideology is different. And so what you see when he says transforming the nation is to his ideology. And so that is what is happening. And people may poo-poo that and they say, oh, it's not, that can't possibly be true. Not in this country. Yes, I am telling you, in this country. And the evidence is clear and obvious if you want to look. And, you can go to any county recorder's office and type in conservancy. And what you will get is a list of all the properties that have a conservancy on them. All you need to do is look at the contracts on those properties, and you will see exactly the authority that the conservancy has. Well, if somebody lives on that property, they no longer have the rights on that property to control it. You just live it. It's like being a renter. You're paying for the property, you're paying for the taxes on the property, but you no longer have say on that property. You are just a renter on that property. That the actual controlling interest in that property is basically the government, either the government through a conservancy or the government directly. And you will never have, like you said, and the point is well made, you have no control over who those conservancies control go to. Mm-hmm. And so think about this logically for a second. We have a $17 trillion debt with the Chinese. We have no gold left in Fort Knox. We have no assets to back that debt. If China calls that debt, what is the one asset that we do have?
Absolutely.
The federal government has.
Mm-hmm.
We have property. They own all of Nevada, basically, 70%. If they take controlling interest in all these properties through the Land Conservancy, that is another asset that they have. That can be easily used to back the Chinese debt that we have. Now, who's in control of your property?
Right. And
the Chinese communists, not the American communists.
Exactly.
And how scary is this?
No, people aren't thinking this, and so I'm glad you brought that up. Here's to your point. A woman in Oak Park, Michigan, she's a homeowner. She was charged with violating zoning laws in 2011. The code enforcement officers arrested her for planting an organic garden in her front yard because it was in contradiction to the new sustainable ordinances. They found that her garden was not suitable for the front yard. I mean, so not only do you have that happening, but then consider if you have signed over an easement to one of these conservancies, who's going to want to pay any fair market price for your land if you ever decide to sell it? I mean, I know I wouldn't. Would you buy that property?
No, and that is part of what you see in practice. If somebody sells an easement on this property, one of the first things that happens is that property loses value.
Right.
Well, what's the impact? So what, people would say? Well, if that property loses value, therefore you have a decrease in taxes, real estate taxes going to the county you live in. Now, you have to make up for that. There's a fixed cost associated with running the county. And so somebody needs to make up for the loss in that property value. And so the rest of us, our property tax has to go up.
Right.
If that property ever gets transferred to a park because you can't sell the property because it's lost too much value, now it comes completely off the tax rolls, and now that's a larger impact on the tax implication. In Geauga County, part of the regional plan is to make Geauga County basically a park for Cleveland. Mm-hmm. And the way that they do that over a period of time is to force a lot of this property out of the private sector into the public sector, so it's owned by the government. People have to pay the taxes in Geauga County. Pretty soon those taxes become so high that it's really, only the rich can live in the country area. Everybody else moves into Cleveland. Well, Cleveland wins in that because you've got all these people, not Cleveland, which today the taxes are much higher in Cleveland because they abuse their citizens. Well, now taxes will be lower because they're forcing the taxes up here in Geauga County. So they're getting what they want. I was once told in a meeting when I asked the folks around the table, Geauga County people, what their vision of the future was. They told me densely populated communities surrounded by green space. That's their objective. And when I asked them, well, what about the Constitution? What about free choice? What about liberty? Their response to me, and this is Ed Fitzgerald, second in command, the county commissioners out of Lake County, the regional transit authority out of Lake County, what their response, and the head of the Bike Association for Cleveland, their response to me and the question, well, what about the Constitution, was, well, that's an old archaic document. It really is meaningless.
Oh.
And so that is the mindset. There is a battle of ideologies here.
Right.
It's sad to say in this day and age that we live, I thought I'd be retired fishing and hunting and having a good time with my grandkids. And now I find that I've got to defend their future, even though they don't know it, even though they don't appreciate it. If I don't do that, they won't have a future. They won't have the same future that I have. Right. Their future will be a socialist, European socialist kind of a viewpoint. And I've lived in or traveled in Europe. I don't want to live in Europe. I don't want to live in Germany where everybody lives in densely populated communities surrounded by green space. If you've ever gone to Germany, that's what they have. That's not the lifestyle that I want. That's
right.
not the lifestyle I want for my kids because it fundamentally tears at the fabric of liberty and freedom.
And I think most people don't want that. They just don't know about it. Now, another portion of this Agenda 21 that ties in with regionalism is that Wildlands Project, where they want to set aside 50% of America to make it off limits to humans. And that chairman of ICLEI, he said individual rights will have to take a backseat to the collective. And you mentioned the collective before. And basically what they're going to do is just what you said, is that if your home is in a designated area, say Geauga County, housing will be prohibited through increased taxation and maybe even regulations such as updating your home to current building code standards. And so now you're non-conforming and you're uninsurable. So where are you going to go? You're going to go to the densely populated Cleveland, and that's just another way to get you out. So this Wildlands Project is another interesting piece of this puzzle.
Well, it is exactly part of their plan. I mean, if you took a look at the plan, and this is not something that's being hidden, by the way. This is out in the open. It's public. It's sad to think that the public does not have the reasoning or the critical thinking skills necessary to look at it and understand what's going on. If you look at the NEOSCC website, now, by the way, I own NEOSCC.com, so you want to go to NEOSCC.org.
Okay.
I tried to put together a counter website. They were foolish enough not to buy their own list, and so I own it now. And I'm anybody who wants to contribute information to counter their nonsense, let me know.
Excellent.
But if you go to the NEOSCC.org website, you'll see all their presentations. You'll see that what their plan is to create a transportation corridor across northeastern Ohio and down to Columbus and Akron with high-speed trains, quote-unquote high-speed going 40 miles an hour with multiple stops, and to connect bicycle trails all along that route because they want you riding bicycles. They made a comment the other day how great it would be to be able to ride a bicycle from here to Columbus.
Yeah, in Northeast Ohio in the snow belt,
Yeah.
we're going to be riding bikes. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. You better get used to it because that is their plan for you. You will either be in mass transit or you will be in a bicycle. And they're happy about that. And they're not shy about it. They tell you that. They're investing. This is maddening to me, and I'm fighting it. I looked at the last NOACA report, financial report for roads. They're going to be investing $6.5 million in bicycle trails. At the same time, you'll hear out of the next conversation that they have how they don't have enough tax dollars to fill potholes, and we need to increase the taxes on people because we can't take care of our roads. We don't have enough money. If I say to them, look, let's set a priority here, bicycle trails are not a priority, I don't think, in my mind. Well, I like bicycle trails and people want them. Let's, open up their wallets and they can pay for a bicycle trail directly. All the bikers, because there's less bikers than cars.
Right.
And so let's take the money that was supposed to be allocated to roads, put it into our roads, and if we have anything left over after we've taken care of all our roads, then possibly we can talk about a bicycle trail. That's not their mindset. Their mindset is their priority is bicycle trails and enhancements, which are planting trees. And then they'll claim that they don't have enough money to operate, and they'll cry the blues because our roads are so important, and why would you hate the road? It's like, why do you hate education? Why do you hate little kids? We need to spend more money, even though we're spending $12,000 per student today, and we can't seem to educate them. That is the continuous mantra of the progressive left, and those people who are what I will call Marxists. And yet that's what they're in. It's clear. Go to the website, you'll see all. You'll see that they want to force people out of Geauga County into Cleveland. They have a today map that shows that Geauga County is in their first ring and second ring suburbs. I don't think I'm part of Cleveland's first ring and second ring suburbs. I live in Geauga County. Right. I'm part of Cleveland. But by their definition, I live in the first ring, second ring suburbs of Cleveland. And if you look at their 2040 map, which is their forecast of where we're going, the first ring, second ring suburbs no longer exist. What now exists in their futuristic map of our county is green space. It's just that people have to look and have the critical thinking skills to be able to look at it and determine what it is they're saying.
Okay, so if we don't want that to happen, whether it's here in Geauga County or any other county throughout the United States, we need to be aware, we need to know what to look for, we need to be attending our meetings so that, how can they grab all of the land in Geauga County if we don't let it happen?
Well, and that is precisely right. Now, again, they use these great terms like we got to protect the farmland. Don't you agree with that? Well, who doesn't agree that we need to protect farmland? Everybody agrees with that. I think that the best way to protect farmland is to sell it to a farmer who is then going to protect the land.
Right.
Their concept of how to protect farmland is to sell it to the government and let the government control it. That doesn't fit in my worldview. I'm sorry, I will fight that all day long. And so if people want to get engaged and if they agree with me, the people out there that are listening to this radio program agree with me and with Pat, then you need to stand up, go to your township, city council, county commissioner meetings, and say unequivocally, no, we do not want regionalism. No, we do not want this shared, this vision of collectivism that's going on, and we will find somebody to replace you if that's what you think. I know none of us have time. You have to make the time. Make the time to get informed in your local community. Ask questions. Go to a trustee meeting, write them a letter, do some public information requests, get information about those things you think are important. Education, regionalism. You can ask for a copy of the budget. It is very, very telling what goes on in your communities and in your school system. You will quickly see whether you're being abused as a taxpayer. Get involved. Get engaged. Speak up. There's some of us that are doing that, but we need far, far more people to really have an impact.
Right.
And so I would encourage everybody just to get as engaged as you can.
Absolutely. That's what this show is all about, and that's what you and I are all about. So if our listeners have any questions, if they want to learn more, if they want to contact you, give us all of that information.
Well, if they want to reach out to me, they can go to my website. Right now I'm running for county commissioner in Geauga County. There's contact information on my website. There's a form. You can just fill out the form, press the button, and I get contacted through email. My email is skip@skipclaypool.com. It's pretty easy. I've got a Facebook account, Friends of Skip Claypool, so Facebook.com/Friends of Skip Claypool. I'm also got a Twitter account at Friends of Skip Claypool.
You've got a lot on your plate.
I've got a lot on my plate, and I could use some help. If anybody out there wants to be my campaign manager, and Pat, I may be addressing that to you.
I knew you were looking at me, even though it's radio here.
I am looking for somebody to help me to keep organized, because that is well, I'm generally an organized person. I've just got so much going on.
There's too much.
To keep it all track with. So,
all right.
Anyway, I really appreciate the time, Pat. I think you do a great job. I love speaking up and speaking out. I know this is your program is all about getting people engaged, and I think you're doing a great job.
Well, and I think the same of you as well. Thank you for sharing this with us today, and as new bits of information come up, we'll have you back on the show to keep our listeners informed. So thanks so much.
Anytime.
Thanks so much. Mm-hmm.